For millennia, the plant we now recognize as cannabis began its quiet existence as a wind-borne seed. Across the vast steppes, this unassuming stalk emerged from the soil long before names, laws, or debates ever touched it. Its early utility was undeniable: sturdy fibers for ropes, nutritious seeds for sustenance and oil, and dried flowers with a mysterious potency. From ancient rituals to modern legislation, this single plant has profoundly impacted human societies, evolving from practical resource to potent medicine, sacred sacrament, and eventually a contested commodity. The earliest whispers of cannabis trace back over 6,000 years, found in the rich soils of northern China, particularly the Yellow River Basin. Here, in cultures like Yangshao and Hemudu, archaeological findings reveal its presence in Neolithic toolkits, fibers woven into cloth and cord. This wasn't a sudden discovery, but a slow, deliberate domestication. Early farmers and herders across Eurasia, from Neolithic China to Bronze Age steppe peoples, intuitively selected plants for their strong fibers, nourishing seeds, and, in certain regions, for their resinous flowers. This human intervention etched itself into the plant's genetic code, gradually diverging into the lanky, fiber-rich varieties we call hemp and the more compact, resin-dense strains prized for their intoxicating properties. Evidence from the Pazyryk peoples in the Altai Mountains, buried in permafrost, unveils a different story. Residues in wooden braziers suggest ceremonial use, a deeper connection beyond mere utility. In the Tarim Basin, along the Proto-Silk Road, archaeologists unearthed a trove of dried cannabis in the Yangshao grave, dating back 2,500 years. These plants were exceptionally rich in compounds that alter consciousness, hinting at cultivation for ritual inhalation, a practice famously described by an ancient Greek historian who witnessed Scythian tents filled with hemp vapor, men reportedly leaping as if their minds were opening to another realm. Across ancient civilizations, cannabis found its place in both the practical realm of medicine and the ethereal world of ritual. In China, the legendary divine farmer, Shen Nong, is credited with cataloging hundreds of herbs, including cannabis, for its nutritional seeds and medicinal flowers. Later imperial Chinese compendiums, like the Great Pharmacopoeia of the Ming era, documented its use for ailments ranging from constipation to topical plasters for swollen joints. To the south, on the Indian subcontinent, cannabis intertwined with sacred and daily life. Ancient Vedic hymns mention bhang, a preparation of the plant, often with ambivalent reverence, a dispeller of fear, yet also a reliever of suffering. Ayurvedic texts, compiled over centuries, meticulously cataloged cannabis as a therapeutic agent for pain, a digestive stimulant, a sedative, and even as part of anesthetic mixtures for surgery. An ancient surgeon described using such substances to blunt pain and make incisions survivable. Even in ancient Egypt, medical scrolls like the Ebers Papyrus, around 1550 BCE, hint at cannabis in prescriptions for eye conditions, inflammation, or labor pains. While direct proof is debated among scholars due to linguistic complexities, the empirical pattern is clear. Societies everywhere learned which plants dulled pain or relaxed the body, meticulously recording these observations in recipes carried across cultures. The Greeks and Romans also explored its potential. An ancient Greek physician serving the Roman army included cannabis in his comprehensive medical encyclopedia, noting its use for earaches and as an ointment for pain. Another Roman naturalist documented hemp's diverse uses, from strong fibers to nutritious seeds, and its medicinal applications. Throughout these diverse cultures, cannabis was handled with care, often as part of complex mixtures, a testament to its respected yet potent nature. The Islamic Golden Age, particularly the Abbasid Caliphate in 9th century Baghdad, became a crucible for medical knowledge. Greek pharmacopoeias were meticulously translated into Arabic, preserving and expanding upon ancient wisdom. Renowned physicians like the Persian polymath al-Razi and the physician-philosopher Ibn Sina, whose Canon of Medicine influenced European medical thought for centuries, included cannabis in their extensive compendiums. They prescribed it for pain, swelling, and various ailments. Apothecaries in Cordoba, Cairo, and Baghdad prepared cannabis-based remedies, carefully measuring doses. These preparations varied widely: poultices of crushed leaves for swollen joints, salves infused with plant oils for skin conditions, decoctions and teas for labor pains or gastrointestinal distress, and inhalations to ease chest discomfort. In some traditions, more daring concoctions served as anesthetics during surgery. This period solidified cannabis's role as a therapeutic agent, its use balanced between medicine and potential mischief, a dichotomy understood by the skilled apothecaries of the era. Beyond medicine, cannabis found its way into ritual and spiritual practice. While early Islamic texts prohibited alcohol, cannabis presented a different challenge for jurists. Some Sufi orders, seeking ecstatic states for spiritual union, occasionally adopted hashish, a resinous concentrate, as an aid to meditation and trance. This association, however, fueled suspicion. The term hashashin became a pejorative, linked to legendary tales of drug-induced devotion among an ancient militant sect, a narrative popularized centuries later by travelers like Marco Polo. Despite historical debunking of the literal truth of these stories, the rhetorical power of linking cannabis to zealotry persisted. For centuries, industrial hemp was a cornerstone of pre-industrial economies, its coarse fibers indispensable for rope, sailcloth, textiles, and even paper. Empires measured their ambitions in cordage. Imagine the vast sailing fleets of 17th and 18th century Europe, the Spanish Armada, Dutch trading fleets, the British Royal Navy. Every ship, from its rigging to its sails, consumed tons of hemp. Regions across northern Europe, from Estonia to the Baltic shores, became renowned for their hemp production, supplying the burgeoning maritime trade. In bustling dockyards like Portsmouth or Chatham, the air hung heavy with the scent of tar and hemp dust. Rope makers stretched fibers into miles of rigging, while weavers crafted heavy canvas sailcloth. Even oakum, the shredded fibers from old ropes, found new life sealing ship seams. States actively fostered hemp cultivation, offering incentives like tax exemptions or even mandating its growth to secure supplies for their navies. Louis XIV's minister in France and Peter the Great in Russia both understood that naval power was intrinsically linked to a steady flow of hemp. However, the 19th century brought technological shifts that gradually eclipsed hemp's centrality. Eli Whitney's cotton gin in 1793 revolutionized cotton processing, making it far more profitable. The mechanization of textile mills further favored cotton over labor-intensive hemp. In papermaking, the advent of wood pulp processes in the mid-19th century rendered hemp rags obsolete. And crucially, steam replaced sail. Iron and coal-powered ships and steel cables began to replace hemp for the heaviest lines. Though it lingered in pockets, hemp's industrial dominance waned, its future trajectory now divergent from its psychoactive cousin. While industrial hemp faded, the psychoactive forms of cannabis, known as hashish, charas, or bang, continued their journey through different cultural channels, often entangled with social and legal struggles. In the early 20th century, particularly in the United States, public perception of cannabis took a dramatic turn. Revolutions and economic upheavals in Mexico, beginning in 1910, led to waves of migration north into the American Southwest. These migrants brought with them their cultural practices, including the recreational and ritual use of cannabis. In crowded border towns, the presence of this foreign drug became fodder for local anxieties, often racially charged. Newspapers sensationalized these changes, introducing the anglicized word marijuana into headlines, linking it not just to intoxication, but to violence, vice, and moral degeneracy, rarely supported by scientific evidence. These lurid stories provided the rhetorical glue for municipal ordinances. Across the 1910s and 20s, local councils in the American Southwest and other scattered municipalities began restricting or penalizing marijuana possession. These local actions coalesced into national policy with the emergence of a key political figure, Harry J. Anslinger, the commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in 1930. Anslinger orchestrated a relentless public relations campaign, testifying before Congress, feeding sensational stories to the press, and cultivating allies. His rhetoric was often racially charged, linking marijuana to alleged crimes committed by Mexican or African Americans. He propagated lurid, often fabricated tales of young men driven to violence or madness after smoking the plant. The press, particularly William Randolph Hearst's newspapers, eagerly amplified Anslinger's narrative. Popular culture responded with melodramas like Reefer Madness, a film depicting a descent from a single puff to ruin and insanity. This atmosphere of moral panic, fueled by economic depression and a desire for social control, paved the way for the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. Though framed as a tax and regulatory measure, its onerous compliance requirements and steep penalties effectively criminalized most lawful commerce in cannabis. This act, signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, sealed the plant's legal fate in the United States for decades, pushing traditional practices underground and disproportionately impacting communities of color. As prohibition hardened, scientific curiosity quietly pursued understanding. In 1964, Israeli chemists Raphael Mechoulam and Yechiel Gaoni made a pivotal breakthrough, isolating delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, the molecule primarily responsible for cannabis's psychoactive effects. This discovery transformed cannabis from a mysterious botanical into a definable, manipulable chemical, opening doors for pharmacological study. However, this scientific awakening collided with a rising tide of social and political anxiety. The 1960s saw cannabis gain new cultural meaning, becoming a symbol of rebellion and counterculture, often accompanying anti-war sentiment and social liberation movements. Governments, however, responded not with nuance, but with force. In 1971, President Richard Nixon declared drug abuse public enemy number one, initiating what became known as the War on Drugs. The Controlled Substances Act of 1970 formalized a schedule system, placing cannabis in Schedule 1, high potential for abuse, no accepted medical use, and no safe dosage. This classification directly contradicted emerging scientific understanding and disregarded the findings of the 1972 Schaefer Commission, which recommended decriminalization for simple possession, a report promptly shelved. The subsequent decades, particularly under President Ronald Reagan, saw the war on drugs intensify, leading to mandatory minimum sentences, increased law enforcement funding, and a vast expansion of the criminal justice system focused on drugs. The rhetoric of zero tolerance and tough on crime militarized police units and justified asset forfeiture. This punitive apparatus disproportionately targeted Black and Latino communities, despite similar usage rates across racial groups, creating a devastating social geography of punishment that persists today. Amidst the escalating war on drugs, a quiet but powerful resistance began to emerge, driven by patient needs. In the mid-1980s and early 90s, the AIDS epidemic brought a humanitarian urgency to cannabis activism. Patients suffering from wasting, nausea, and pain found relief in cannabis that modern palliative care often couldn't provide. Figures like Brownie Mary Rathbun in San Francisco, who baked cannabis-infused treats for AIDS patients and faced repeated arrests, became symbols of compassionate care colliding with harsh law. Inspired by these struggles, activists like Dennis Perrone, a Vietnam veteran, galvanized patient networks. He co-authored California's landmark Proposition 215, the Compassionate Use Act of 1996. This initiative, passed by popular vote, for the first time in modern American history, enshrined the right of patients to use cannabis with a physician's recommendation. It was not a complete victory, but a crucial opening, challenging federal prohibition with state-level medical autonomy. Prop 215 exposed a deep contradiction. Federal law still classified cannabis as Schedule 1, allowing federal prosecutions even where state law authorized use. This clash, tested in Supreme Court cases like United States v. Oakland Cannabis Buyers Cooperative and Gonzalez v. Reich, affirmed federal authority but did not nullify states' capacity to create programs. The practical effect was bewildering for patients and early entrepreneurs, forcing dispensaries to operate in a legal gray area, often as cash-only businesses, navigating complex state regulations without federal banking access. Parallel to the legal and social shifts, scientific understanding of cannabis deepened dramatically. The late 1980s and early 1990s witnessed the discovery of the endocannabinoid system. Researchers identified specific receptors, CB1 receptors concentrated in the brain and CB2 receptors in immune tissues, and then, crucially, cloned their genes. These discoveries profoundly reframed cannabis research. THC was no longer just an external drug, but a key that unlocked a fundamental biological system governing appetite, memory, pain, and inflammation. Became even more profound with the identification of the body's own cannabinoids. In 1992, researchers isolated an endogenous ligand that bound to the cannabinoid receptor, naming it anandamide from the Sanskrit word for bliss. A second major endogenous ligand, 2-arachidonyl glycerol, was characterized in the mid-90s. These molecules are synthesized on demand, acting as short-lived messengers that modulate neurotransmitter release, effectively regulating homeostasis, the brain's fine-tuning instrument for excitability, stress response, and metabolic needs. This surge of knowledge offered immense therapeutic promise. Manipulating the ECS could potentially relieve pain, reduce spasticity, curb chemotherapy-related nausea, and protect neurons. Clinical programs built on this promise, dronabinol, a synthetic THC, was approved in the 80s for nausea and appetite stimulation. Plant-derived medicines combining THC and CBD gained authorization in several countries for spasticity. However, the system's ubiquity also presented peril. A drug designed to curb appetite by manipulating CB1 receptors was withdrawn due to psychiatric side effects, a stark reminder that tinkering with the body's delicate regulatory music risks breaking the symphony. The scientific revelations and state-level reforms like California's Prop 215 exerted growing pressure on the international drug control system. Treaties, initially drafted in the mid-20th century under the principle of limiting controlled substances to medical and scientific use, struggled to accommodate these new realities. The 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, the backbone of international drug control, had placed cannabis under severe limitations, effectively equating it with tightly controlled opiates due to prevailing political caution and incomplete science. However, the tide began to turn. Patient stories, scientific data, and national policy innovations from countries like Uruguay and Canada created strains within the international framework. The International Narcotics Control Board, the bureaucratic custodian of these treaties, issued stern reminders of international obligations, but diplomatic rebukes had limited bite against national political will. In a landmark shift, the World Health Organization's expert committee undertook a formal review of cannabis. After painstaking deliberation, their recommendations led to a historic vote in December 2020. Member states accepted a WHO recommendation to remove cannabis and cannabis resin from the harshest of the Single Conventions lists, while retaining it under Schedule 1 control. This was not international legalization, but a symbolic and procedural recalibration, acknowledging that prior scheduling had been too blunt an instrument and that medicinal value required more careful accounting.
This evolving landscape paved the way for the modern cannabis industry, which began slowly but accelerated with startling speed. Canada's national legalization in 2018 was a pivotal moment, signaling to global capital that a high-income country with federal regulation could embrace a legal market. Investors poured into the green rush, launching companies that became household names in the sector. Markets, however, bifurcated. Medical supply chains could engage in cross-border commerce under treaty allowances, while recreational markets remained domestically contained due to ongoing international prohibitions. Today, the cannabis landscape is a complex tapestry of health evidence, social justice imperatives, and market incentives. On the health front, the record is mixed but still forming. Certain cannabinoid-based medicines show clear efficacy, from synthetic THC for chemotherapy-induced nausea to purified CBD for rare pediatric epilepsies. For chronic pain, benefits are modest but significant for subsets of patients. Risks are also real. Heavy adolescent use is linked to altered cognition for some, and the association with psychosis in vulnerable individuals is complex. Public health systems must anticipate increased demand for treatment and grapple with challenges like impaired driving, where THC pharmacokinetics are messy. The danger of unregulated synthetic cannabinoids, as evidenced by the 2019 vaping crisis linked to illicit products, underscores the importance of quality control in legal markets. Crucially, the politics of justice remains central. Decades of disproportionate enforcement have left communities scarred by arrests and convictions. Expungement and record sealing have become policy priorities, alongside social equity programs aimed at ensuring profits from legalization don't flow solely to the already wealthy. States like Illinois and California have explicitly tied licensing and reinvestment to equity goals, though true reparations require capital, market access, technical assistance, and sustained political will. Looking ahead, the future of cannabis is a set of plausible futures. One path is a robust public health model. Careful advertising limits, strict age controls, rigorous testing, reasonable taxation to deter youth use while undercutting illicit markets, and expansive social equity measures. In this scenario, markets are constrained, research accelerates, and harms are managed. Another path is a commercialized model. Aggressive corporate consolidation, high-potency product marketing, potentially replicating the patterns seen with alcohol and tobacco industries, with uneven attention to equity. A third trajectory involves a reworked international law, allowing regulated global trade in medical and adult-use cannabis, a politically fraught but technically possible shift.
The future will hinge on scientific advancements, guiding policymakers with clearer data and nuanced understandings. Law will matter, banking reform, equitable licensing, workplace protections, and culture will matter, how societies narrate use, who participates in the market, and whether victims of past policies are acknowledged and aided. From clinics to dispensaries, from labs to community centers, of cannabis is one of governance at scale, of how societies decide what is commerce and what is health, which harms to prioritize, and which debts to acknowledge. The choices we make now will determine how softly or how clumsily we repair what prohibition broke.